I miss you. Oh yeah. You know I miss you, baby. You know I miss you.
I'm ready. How's everyone doing this afternoon?
Yeah.
That's how you do it. Thank you, Zia.
Of course.
Nice.
Of course, let's do it.
Yeah, so hello and thank you all for being here today. My name is Io Roach. I'm the Vice President of Grant Programs at Comic Relief US. We're a nonprofit that leverages the power of entertainment. We invest in nonprofit organizations, all of whom are doing work to break the cycle of intergenerational poverty. At Comic Relief, we've been on a journey these last few years. We've been investing significantly in Black and brown, so specifically Black and Latino and Indigenous led organizations, LGBTQ led organizations, as well as a youth advisory council. A youth advisory council that is led by Gen Z change makers who are partnering closely with Comic Relief. They are administering and directing their own grants program, and they are investing in youth-led organizations and initiatives all over the world, across Africa, across the Middle East, the US, South America. Today we're here to talk about Gen Z's role in the creator economy. Specifically, we're here to talk about how brands, how agencies kind of leverage Gen Z creators in the work that they do. For quite a long time, brands and agencies have regarded this emerging generation as merely consumers, overlooking their potential as creators and change makers. And the truth is that Gen Z desires to have an inclusive partnership with brands, with agencies. They want to be heard, they want to be seen. Wherever diverse perspectives and voices are acknowledged and where they're given a platform. And that's a perfect segue to our panelists, who are all passionate about partnering with Gen Z audiences and really giving a voice to this generation of creators and young leaders. Our panelists, I'd like for you to introduce yourselves, starting with Ziad.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here, and thank you, Io, and Comic Relief, and Ravi for putting this together and for having me. I'm excited and grateful to be in conversation. I am Ziad Ahmed. I use he, him pronouns. I am the CEO and founder of Juve Consulting, which is what Refinery 29 calls the largest and most popular Gen Z agency. And I come from a place of believing that the world looks better when diverse young people have a seat at the table. And I am deeply grateful to have been given a seat at this table to be in conversation with you all today. And really excited about where we can take this conversation, both metaphorically and physically, insofar as how we can continue to amplify diverse young voices far beyond my own, and very grateful for the work that all of you all do to advance that. So I know we'll get into it a lot more, but I'm 24 years old. I am a Gen Zer. I should have said that. And it is my second can, and there's no stage I would rather be on than with you all right here, right now. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Ziad.
That was an awesome intro, Ziad. Hi, everyone. My name is Marla Williams, and I'm a marketing director at PepsiCo, and I'm currently responsible for leading brand equity for Doritos, which essentially means that my role and my team's role is to create campaigns and experiences that help maintain or grow our brand's most loved status with all consumers, but especially young consumers. And so that's a big reason why I'm really excited to be a part of this panel, and I just appreciate this opportunity so much. So thank you for having me.
Thank you.
And hi, everyone. My name is Amy. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Good Loop. We build technology that help brands do good at scale. And I started the business 6.5 years ago with a mission to use the $500 billion that we spend buying and selling eyeballs to fund some of the amazing work that amazing NGOs like Comic Relief are doing every single day.
Thank you. Thanks all of you for being here today. Before we dive into specific examples of how you're incorporating young and diverse talent into the work that you're doing, we thought it would be great for each of you to share a little bit about how your unique backgrounds contribute to the work that you do.
Yeah. Well, Assalamu alaikum, right? I am Muslim, and I lead with my faith, and I lead with community and ummah at the heart of what I do, which is this idea that I think that we owe a lot to those before us, and we owe a lot to those around us. And so when I think about how my identity, how my community impacts me showing up here today, it is everything. And it is the very reason that this beach exists, right? That we are centered in this notion, I think, of believing that more of us should have a seat at the table. And so my story is one of having started a nonprofit when I was in around 8th grade. Built on my experiences as a person of color, as an American Muslim, as a political progressive, and looking around my school hallways like I'm sure everyone in this room has done, and realizing that so many kids are being otherized because of who society thinks they should be, right? And feeling smaller than and less than. And so I started this nonprofit to create infrastructure, to create resources such that students, people could feel more empowered in their hallways every single day. And through that experience, I found myself in rooms that I did not know exist, maybe like ones that can, where oftentimes there is so much conversation about diverse young people, but so little conversations with young people. People love to talk about the power of young people, but people do not love to empower young people. And so I saw that happening and unfolding all around me. And so my junior year of high school, I founded Juve Consulting with this very notion that I believe the world looks better when diverse young people have a seat at the table. I believe the expert on any reality is the person closest to that reality. And so this very question of why this panel is even being convened, around how we amplify and include more diverse young voices at the table, that is all that I think about and do. I want a world where when we're talking about any community, that community is centered in the conversation, not as an intern in the corner taking notes metaphorically or literally, but as a decision maker at the head of the table. And so that is the work that we're fighting to do every single day, working with clients to center diverse young voices, to co-create products, campaigns, ideas, social good that actually resonates with the communities that are oftentimes being talked about, but very rarely talked to. And so that's how my identity and my community intersect with the very conversation that we're having today. And I'm really grateful to be in partnership and community with those who are as committed to the advancing of that goal and to that mission as you all are.
Thank you, Ziad. Marlo.
Wow.
I know, that's a lot to follow.
That's really inspiring. I think for me, personally, my life has always been fueled by how can I make the most impact. And I think I decided to pursue a career in marketing because I saw the power that stories through advertising could have in reaching the hearts and minds of people. And so I think for me, obviously, I'm a woman of color, I'm a Black woman, and so I bring that to my everyday work. And I think that relates to what we're going to be talking about today in terms of how to best reach Gen Z and empower diverse creators of color, in terms of Gen Z being the most diverse cohort that we've ever had, them being the most diverse and inclusive generation, not just in terms of culturally or ethnically, but in lots of many ways as well. And then the second thing is in terms of working on a brand like Doritos. Doritos has a legacy of standing for disrupting the status quo and defying the convention, which, the fact that I even have a seat at a table like this as a young Black woman, I think speaks to that as well. Is very similar to what we find in partnering with creators of color in what we do from a brand perspective. And so I think there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to learn from Gen Z. There's a lot to partner with Gen Z in terms of empowerment on to better reach consumers and ultimately tell stories that positively impact our communities and culture.
Thank you, Marlo.
Sure. Marlo, you said, you work in marketing because you feel like that the power of stories is such a big part of how we change society, and that is something I really resonate with. I have spent my whole career in marketing. I started working in advertising when I was, straight out of college. And the whole time I felt this conflict because it felt so important and so futile at the exact same time. You know, I felt like we were building the brands that connect across all generations and races and types of people and countries. We were building the stories that, you know, play out in people's lounges, you know, in mainstream TV, whilst equally, I remember vividly a 3-day workshop on the meaning of freshness, and I remember thinking, that's too many days. Like, you don't need to spend that long thinking about freshness. So anyway, I feel like marketing has this fantastic potential, but so often we're focused on the wrong things. And so often we're spending our money in a way that is not as conscious as the brands we say we are. I see so many brands do beautiful campaigns that win awards at Cannes, super inspiring, tear-jerking work, and then they take that ad and they put it on a non-skippable pop-up autoplay thing that follows you around the internet, and you think so much of their media spend is not reflective of the values they hold. So for me, when I started my company, it was about taking some of the principles of brand purpose or responsibility and applying it to media, applying it to the 90% of a brand's budget that dictates what they fund in the world and how they show up in consumers' lives.
Thank you so much, Amy. Right now, Gen Z is having a moment. More
Yes,
and more,
keeps me in business.
Yes. More and more brands are paying closer attention to this audience of consumers, all of whom have tremendous spending power and influences and/or influence. What are some of the trends you are seeing in terms of how brands and marketers are treating this audience? Ziad, why don't I start with you?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is all I do. So this is all I think about. I think Gen Z is certainly having a moment, right? When I started my company, I was 16 years old, and folks still referred to us as millennials. The very vocabulary around Gen Z did not yet exist. The cognizance of our existence, let alone of our power, had not yet reached the mainstream. Today, we live in a world where there are Gen Z headlines and panels more often than I can count. What has not changed is that diverse young voices are still not being heard, right? And that is the conundrum that I'm contending with every single day. However, I have seen a massive shift and change around that, primarily often because of creators. Oftentimes, right, especially when I was younger and I started, you know, and I'd speak at conferences and people would come up to me afterwards and be like, you're smart, you're energetic, we love you, you should come intern for me, right? And I'd be like, I'm okay, right? Like, I employ people with children, but I'm flattered, right? And there's this idea that a lot of people, I think, have, which is that the only place a young person can be is at the bottom. That even the most bright, the most dynamic, the most impassioned, the most change-making young people ought to wait their turn, ought to listen first and lead later, ought to ask for permission, ought to go through the same struggles that you went through and become hardened on the other end after they've lost all of their joy and are only jaded, right? And I think that's what a lot of society tells us, and so what I think it has changed is two things. One, creators have upended that. Entrepreneurs and creators and activists who said, no, we're not gonna wait our turn. And you have to contend with this because your media dollars are gonna go further with creators. And your media dollars and your spend is going to be reckless unless you engage with the people who control the majority of audience, who are the diverse young people who've always been responsible for the majority of cultural creation. It is not new, it is not news, right, that it is young, diverse people who are responsible for the very trends that brands try to exploit and take advantage of. It is perhaps just new that you have to compensate those people now, because those creators are your only mechanism rather than just linear to reach your audience. And so subsequently, because of creators, because of activists, because of organizers who said, we're gonna tear down these walls and claim the microphone right now and not wait our turn, we're seeing more folks shake a little bit in their boots and have to say, okay, we have to pull over another seat. And we're gonna hear you. How often they're listening is still another story. But for the first time, more and more, we're seeing that seat be created, and it's encouraging. It's a step in the right direction, and I'm grateful often to occupy that seat. And I can only hope that from the place of privilege that I'm speaking, that I can use it responsibly, right? To advance the issues, the causes, the ethos that I know to be so central to my generation and to the diverse, marginalized communities around me. And so I've seen a lot of pivots in this space in terms of the cognizance, in terms of the spend, in terms of how creators are being leveraged. But I continue to only feel fulfilled and inspired in my work because of the diverse young people who refuse to not be ignored. And especially coming out of the pandemic, who refuse to believe that this is the best that we can do. Right? Reimagination is what is beautiful about youth. And especially because of the pandemic, I think a lot of folks realize a different world is possible. They lied to us. They told us it isn't. And so we're uniquely, I think, at an age where we can channel that reimagination into action and honor our ancestors and those who came before us with that action to hopefully, inshallah, build a world that's better for all of us.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
Marlo.
Sure. So, from a brand perspective, I would say that Gen Z isn't just having a moment. They're the future growth engine of our brands and our companies. I think the last stat I saw said something like 30% of the global population is represented by Gen Z. And in many ways, they're very different from any other generation in that coming of age life stage. For example, they're digital natives. They grew up in a time where they only knew the internet and technology, and that's very different from prior generations. But in other ways, they're very similar. They're at a time in their life where many of them are asking themselves, who am I really? Who do I want to be? What's my identity? And so I think for brands, especially a brand like Doritos that's at the intersection of youth culture and partnering with creators and influencers, it's a really exciting time to think about our approach.
Getting ready for tonight. The bass is hitting.
It's a really exciting time to think about our approach and how do we consider new forms of content and media platforms in terms of audio being really big with this audience and the importance of podcasts. Obviously, the rise of influencers as celebrity spokespeople that Gen Z trusts and values their opinions on. And then lastly, the idea of, I think, community building and what that looks like more from a phygital standpoint now that we're emerging out of COVID in terms of Gen Z has built such strong digital communities over the last several years. As we're now also entering these physical spaces, what role can brands play in bridging that gap? So I think it's a super exciting time to be a marketer. It's a super exciting time to be leading a brand. And it's an inspiring time to be working with creators, especially young creators of color.
Marlo, so 40% of Gen Z is multicultural. And brands don't necessarily do the best job of representing their values, their point of view. What are some of the challenges, just to kind of expound upon what you were just saying, what are some of the challenges that you feel that brands face in doing that?
For sure. So I think, the first challenge is probably an obvious one that's been talked about here and is why a forum like this exists at Cannes, and that's obviously the opportunity or the need to build a more diverse talent pipeline across the entire advertising and marketing ecosystem. But outside of that, I think from a brand perspective, a couple of opportunity areas that I've seen are, there still seems to be opportunities to bridge the gap between multicultural content and campaigns and broader, bigger brand jobs to be done and business objectives. And so I'm a huge proponent of ensuring that we're partnering with young, diverse creators for our purpose initiatives like Doritos Solid Black, which is focused on amplifying Black voices, Black creators who are making a positive impact on culture at large. And Good Loop has been a fantastic media partner in terms of that mission, but also ensuring that we're considering more diverse creators for things like our Super Bowl campaign or VMA's partnership, because I think that stat of 40% of Gen Z is multicultural means that Gen Pop is becoming multicultural. And so I think for a brand like Doritos or other legacy brands where we're reaching such a mass-wide audience, it's really important that we do those two things in terms of ensuring that we're delivering on multicultural or purpose-driven initiatives that feel really authentic and deeply entwined with the community, but also driving more inclusion in our broader brand initiatives as well.
Thank you, Marlo. Ziad, you've built an agency that is really just kind of focused, centered around lifting up the voices of Gen Z. How should brands be thinking about partnership with Gen Z? You started to touch on that a little bit earlier, but what are some of the ideas you have, and how have you seen some of this kind of play out with your client partners? How are they engaging?
Yeah, of course. So we work with the likes of PepsiCo, which I'm proud to say, right? And we get to work, right, with many of the biggest corporations in the world, as well as organizations, nonprofits, political campaigns, to challenge hegemonic narratives and to hopefully co-create things that actually work for us and work with us. My advice to brands, right, when we usually start the conversation is probably threefold right now. One, the first thing is, I think that it starts with table stakes, which is that a white paper is not sufficient replacement for conversation and community building. And I think too often in marketing and advertising right now, people think because they've read a stat, they understand a community. And the two things are just not analogous, right? We understand when we know, and we know when we learn. And when you learn, it has to come from a place of equalness rather than power. And so when I ask my clients, when's the last time they talked to a young person that isn't your employee or that isn't your kid, and most of them cannot tell me a time, the answer is that you haven't talked to young people, you've talked down to young people. Mm-hmm. Talking with someone as an equal is a very different situation. And so then the second piece becomes, okay, how are you actually creating mechanisms around iteratively engaging with diverse young voices such that you're constantly tapping into the pulse of these young voices that you claim to care so much about? Right? And that's why we build the services that we do. But then how that's manifesting right now is a big ethos and thesis that we're working with as a company is that the future of business is community first, right? Going beyond consumer first, going beyond creator first to say that. It's not just about a brand talking to a consumer. It's about how is a brand creating opportunities for consumers to know each other. Because I think what we all know is that a mental health crisis amongst young people is happening. And people want to belong more than ever before. And so creating opportunities to belong is central, and that has to be multicultural at its core. That has to be intersectional at its core, because Gen Z is multicultural and intersectional at its core. And so creating opportunity for this idea of FOMO inclusivity. Anyone could have been in the supreme line, but I got there first, right? And creating community where people feel like their shared identity, shared values around what we're creating. And that's why we're so proud to do projects like with Coach. We just launched their first sub-brand in 80 years called Coachtopia, which is built with a community of climate-conscious, fashion-forward Gen Zers that have worked thoughtfully to craft the first circular economy brand of its kind. And the reason that it's resonated and sold out twice already in like 2 months as a collection is because it's not chuggy, right? It's not something that feels like a bunch of people in a room decided for a community they knew nothing about. It looks and feels like Gen Zers built it because they did. And our basic hope is that if you want to reach any community, Gen Z or otherwise, build with them. Don't just work around them, right? And I think we're seeing more folks embrace that, and we're proud to be a part of that and to work with folks to actually build the very things that hopefully serve and empower more to us. We're living in an ecosystem where there is so much choice around media and around purchasing and around product. And I think that we all want to be served things that actually work with us and for us. And so we're proud to do work that hopefully advances that.
Thank you. Amy, so, and this is a perfect segue, Ziad. Once we get these diverse creators, partners in the room, Ziad has shared a little bit about how we engage them and how we keep them engaged. One important aspect of this work is for agencies, partners, to be respectful to experiences, voices, diverse experiences. Can you tell us a little bit about your work at Good Loop and how you work with clients to manage that balance?
Sure. So at Good Loop, we don't do any of the creative or purpose strategy. Mm-hmm. Brands come up with that. And then we take over when you want to distribute it. And so what we do is that we buy media just like any other media platform, but we create a simple value exchange at the heart of it. We will never force you to watch an ad, but if you choose to give a little bit of your precious time and attention, then you can unlock a donation to a relevant cause, and you can choose a cause to give it to. So in this way, we've supported Comic Relief with Doritos. We supported various different local change makers and leaders of amazing NGOs that work in local African American communities. It's really about creating that moment where a brand and a consumer do good using the brand's money to fund amazing causes. And to answer your question, I guess my addition to it would be the voice of the NGO, because I think charities are such a valuable source of expertise, of authenticity, of authority. And so often when we see brands trying to advocate or be an ally for a community and it goes pear-shaped, it's because they've not got the authority and consistency, right? I mean, we've all seen the Bud Light fallout, and I do think that's a sad case, and unfortunately it's seen many brands pulling back from Pride Month at a really, really crucial time. But I can see why that fallout happened, because they weren't a brand that's traditionally shown up in that space. They weren't a brand who's traditionally done some of that groundwork. And so by supporting the NGOs, you can really put your money where your mouth is. I've got some lovely examples, like we work with the P&G brand Pantene. And they wanted to do a big piece called Hair Has No Gender. It was all about celebrating the role of trans and gender non-binary people within the beauty industry. And obviously that's a very complex, nuanced space. There's a lot of language that you have to be cognizant of. And so we brought in a charity that could help them just make sure that the language was right, make sure that our targeting was right, so we were actually finding that community and funding that community through the media we were buying. And then another, perhaps less political example is we work with Mini, the car brand, and they were promoting their big family saloon, which ironically isn't Mini at all, it's huge. And so the whole campaign was about how it was so big you could fit the family dog in. So they were supporting a local local animal rescue. It's too hot, I forgot my words. They were promoting an animal rescue charity, and we sent them the creative and the media plan, and they said, that dog looks so miserable in that car, and like hot dogs in cars is a whole thing, it's super dangerous to put your dog in a hot car. So they actually helped craft the creative, and they consulted with the brand, and we delivered an incredible campaign with an adorable, very happy dog in a very safe car. But it was a lovely example of how that NGO's voice around the table is also a really, really nice addition when you're a brand trying to do good in an authentic way.
Thank you. That is such an important point. We are also trying to find that balance and look for that balance. All nonprofits do, all funders do. And it's incredibly important for us to invest in proximate leadership, to partner with organizations that are led by the communities we are serving, and or allies. And I would love to, I could spend another hour just kind of talking about that level of partnership, but I've been given the 5-minute cue about 5 minutes ago. So with that, maybe I'll ask one or two last questions, and give you all an opportunity to really kind of talk about some of the work that you're doing. I'd love to hear about a piece of work that each of you are excited about that you're doing right now with your companies.
Yeah, I mean, look, I talked a little bit about some work we're doing, but I think that it speaks a lot, I think, to your character, that you would use this opportunity, even though Comic Relief is who brought us here, to shine a light on our work rather than your work. And I would love to turn the question back around to you. No, I would love to turn the question back around to you, around what are you excited about, right? Because I think it's important that we live the ethic that we're saying, which is about the fact that we talk a lot about cause. You are the cause. Tell me about what you're excited about that you're working on.
Yeah, well, thank you for that, Ziad. That's amazing. I was thinking about that a little bit before when you all were introducing yourselves and what kind of brought you or what inspires you to do some of the change-making work that you're doing at your organizations. I think, and you were talking a little bit about your background and who you are. For me, I am the daughter of activists, activists who came out of the civil rights era, a father who was born in the Jim Crow South, who came up and became a musician and composer, and an activist, and took his message and his platform all over the world. And I was raised by that father and a mother who's a historian, who's a teacher, who is also deeply rooted in the civil rights era. It's all I know and all that I've kind of grown up with is just kind of thinking about equity and justice across the board. I knew that I was going to do something that allowed me to continue to promote equity and justice. Before it was like popular to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's just for many of us who we are. It's our experience, and because of how we look, because of the color of our skin, because of our religion, because of our background, because of being Black Americans and the history there or in different places around the world, we come into the conversation with a very particular perspective. And that's why it's important to include voices around the table when we talk about authenticity. It's important to be able to look around the room and know that there are perspectives in that room who are reflective of the change that we are saying that we want to make. And so it's great to hear that even though that's not necessarily, a core part of like what your company was supposed to do, that's actually something that you all are recognizing. And you're doing that through each of your leadership. At Comic Relief, that was another incredible opportunity for me to think about the opportunity to invest in proximate leadership. There was a day of reckoning for Comic Relief, like many organizations, like many brands, like many corporations after the murder of George Floyd, where that thinking began, maybe a little bit before that. I'm looking at Allison, our CEO, who really came to Comic Relief just before the murder of George Floyd and was thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then the murder of George Floyd happened. And as an organization, we had an opportunity to think about our own investment strategy and how we could deepen impact in the communities that we work so deeply in. And out of that, and a couple of years later, I'm very proud to say that we are also putting our money where our mouth is, and we are close to 50% of the organizations that we invest in are led by Black, Latino, Indigenous,
That's huge.
LGBTQ leaders and activists. And so we're really, really proud of that.
And we're really proud of that too.
Thank you.
And really excited about that.
Thank you.
And I think that to build on what you just said, I am really excited that we're at a place, right, where Cannes is not always a place that has amplified our voices. But thanks to people like Adrienne who've created Inkwell Beach, who created
Adrienne.
spaces for us to be here.
Yes.
Like, that is where the future is headed, where money, where capital, where opportunity is more equally distributed. And what I'm excited about is to be here at Cannes to do that. We're working with folks to cast and amplify and platform the voices who historically have not been heard, who historically have not been asked the question back, right? But we're just relegated to a position of asking and not answering.
Yeah.
Right? And so to take the microphone back, and one thing I will say that we are really excited about, just quickly, is we're working on our first big conference, which we just announced yesterday at Media Link Beach with Snapchat, which is our title sponsor, called ZCon, which is the first major conference with only Gen Z speakers, where we're taking back the microphone metaphorically and literally to platform diverse young voices and flip the script and really make business folks and our clients and leaders have to listen for diverse young audiences and not just say it's your turn to learn and our turn to lead, but to say, no, we'll learn from you. And we're putting our money and our efforts where our mouth is to really create the infrastructure like Inkwell has done to platform our voices like Comic Relief is doing to invest in our voices in a way that hopefully has a massive ripple effect on our larger culture and community towards progress.
Thank you. Marlo, can we get a couple
Yeah, sure. I'll try to
wise
keep it.
words? Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll try to keep it quick. In terms of the project that I'm most excited about from a Doritos standpoint, it's going to start rolling out next week and continue through the summer, and that's our purpose platform, Solid Black. It's now in year 3, and I'm really proud of how we're thinking about the program in terms of end-to-end impact this year, in terms of the people that are working on it internally representing our diverse cohort, And this isn't being worked on as an extra credit project. It's part of their actual jobs from a cross-functional standpoint. The agencies and media partners that we're working with being reflective and aligning with the with our purpose initiative of amplifying Black voices. And then finally, the community impact, which Amy, I think you spoke to so well in terms of hearing from the people on the ground, the leaders on the ground. We've scaled the program from having 4 change makers last year to 16 change makers who all lead nonprofits across the U.S. To be the face of the program, and we're really excited to be amplifying their causes and mission as Doritos and as part of the Solid Black platform this summer.
And what I will say is, I mean, those 4 change makers you supported last year, when a global brand the size of Doritos decides to support some local, small, not-for-profit, and they get a check for tens of thousands of dollars, it is multiple lives are changed, you know. And we got some of the thank you videos back from some of the partners that you supported, and oh my God, I was in tears, like, because it was like, these are the 5 women you've paid to go to university, or this is it was just so real, because it is that huge global brand and then grassroots impact, and the two rarely meet. So you should be proud of that work, 100%. And I guess I'll bask in your light a bit. I agree. I think I'm also really excited about that work. The thing I am most proud of at Good Loop is that we are the partner who help validate the ROI of all that good stuff. Because it's easy to say we're going to change the world and invest in good and do a beautiful purpose campaign. And we actually have. I mean, that campaign and you know, the work that raised was really impactful. Across the board, Good Loop's raised over $8 million for all sorts of causes. But we also drove a 44% uplift in the perception of Doritos as a brand that supports and invests in the Black community, and a 33% uplift in purchase consideration. Selling more Doritos means that PepsiCo, as a global conglomerate, has a reason to double down and do a bigger campaign next year. And so by validating the ROI of doing good, we help big global brands move a tiny step in the right direction.
Thank you, all of you, Amy,
you.
Marlo, Ziad.
Thank you.
And thank you, Miss Adrienne
Thanks for having
Smith,
us.
for having us.
Thank you. So appreciative. Thank you all for being here.